What if I told you the men who walked beside Jesus, his closest friends, the ones who saw the miracles with their own eyes, didn't live happily ever after? Instead, they vanished into history. Some were hunted, some were tortured, one betrayed him for money, and nearly all of them died in brutal, unforgettable ways. But why? What could possibly make a man choose to die for something he once doubted? This is the untold fate of the 12 disciples. And by the end of this video, you might find yourself questioning what you would die for. They weren't scholars, they weren't soldiers, they were fishermen, tax collectors, regular men, but they followed a man who turned their world upside down. Jesus didn't just teach them to believe, he taught them to live without fear, even when fear was all they had left. And after his crucifixion, instead of running, most of them stayed. They spread his message, knowing exactly what it could cost them. But here's where it gets fascinating. Each one of their stories ends differently. Some with fire, some with exile, and some are still shrouded in mystery. Let's uncover the fate of each disciple, one by one, because these weren't just apostles. They were men who stood on the edge of history and chose to leap. Peter, the rock, the leader, he denied Jesus 3 times, but later became the loudest voice of the early church. Legend says when Rome came for him, they planned to crucify him like his master, but Peter refused, not because he was afraid, but because he didn't think he deserved to die the same way. So they crucified him upside down. James, son of Zebedee, he was fearless, outspoken, the first to be martyred, beheaded in Jerusalem under Herod's rule. No last-minute escape. No miracles, just silence. And then a blade. John, the one Jesus loved. Some say he was boiled in oil and survived. Others say he was exiled to the island of Patmos, where he wrote visions that became the Book of Revelation. He was the only one who didn't die violently, but maybe solitude was its own kind of death. Thomas, the doubter, he needed to see the wounds to believe. But once he believed, he traveled farther than most, all the way to India, where, according to tradition, he was speared by locals while praying. Doubt turned to faith, and faith turned to blood. Matthew, the tax collector turned storyteller, he's credited with writing the Gospel of Matthew, but the story ends in Ethiopia, where he was reportedly stabbed in the back while preaching, killed for the very message he once taxed others to ignore. Philip, always asking questions, always seeking truth. They say he preached in modern-day Turkey, where he was arrested, tortured, and crucified upside down, just like Peter. Bartholomew, also known as Nathaniel, maybe the most brutal fate of them all. He was flayed alive, stripped of his skin, then beheaded, and yet, according to legend, he never screamed. James, son of Alphaeus, the quiet one. Not much is known about him. Some say he was stoned. Others say he was clubbed to death, but no records of fear, no records of retreat. Thaddeus, also called Jude, he preached in Syria and Persia, where he was beaten to death with sticks. Not exactly a glamorous ending for a man who spread peace. Simon the Zealot, a revolutionary, a radical. He might have expected a violent end, and he got one. Sawn in half while still alive, some say. He fought with ideas and paid for it in blood. Judas Iscariot, the betrayer, 30 pieces of silver, a kiss in the garden. But remorse hit fast and hard. He hung himself in a field that became known as the Field of Blood. Matthias, chosen to replace Judas. Little is known about him. Some say he was stoned, then beheaded, almost as if inheriting Judas's place also meant inheriting his curse. Each story could be its own legend, but together they form a pattern, a group of men who didn't just preach faith, they died for it. 12 men, ordinary, until they met someone who made them extraordinary, and yet their reward wasn't comfort, it was pain, torture, isolation, death. So here's the question: what makes a person go to the grave for something they can't prove? Some say they were brainwashed. Others say they were just caught in a cause too big to escape. But would all 12 be willing to die for a lie? There's something haunting about their silence. Not one of them recanted, not even under torture. No one tried to save themselves with a confession. No last-minute backpedaling. If they were deluded, it was a delusion illusion worth dying for. If they were right, then history isn't just history, it's a doorway to something bigger. And maybe, just maybe, the real miracle wasn't walking on water or turning water to wine. Maybe the real miracle was conviction, faith that survived the fire, belief that stayed strong when everything around them crumbled. They didn't change the world with swords, they changed it with stories and sacrifice. They were never meant to be famous. They weren't kings or emperors, but their names echo through time because they stood for something and never let go. 12 men, one message, and a legacy that outlived empires. We remember Caesar, we remember pharaohs, but we also remember Peter, John, and Thomas, not because they conquered, but because they believed. So the next time someone tells you that ordinary people can't change the world, remember these names. They didn't start out as saints. They became legends through pain, through faith, and through fire. And maybe the real question isn't what happened to the 12 disciples. Maybe the real question is, what would you be willing to die for? If that thought stirred something in you, don't just scroll past, subscribe, because the past is full of hidden truths that can still shape your future. And this is just the beginning.